Very good morning and Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to Salem, Oregon. We're having a couple of weeks of sunny weather. I listened back to last year. We're on YouTube. You can watch these videos from last year or even further back. And I said the same thing a year ago. So apparently here in the middle of January, we get our dose of sunshine. This is a picture of the bunch of hyssop and dabbing, painting the Passover blood on the doorposts and on the lintel. Let's get into our portion today. The 15th reading from the Torah is named Bo, which means come. The title comes from the first words of the first verse of the reading, which say, "Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Come to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart.'" The portion begins by concluding the narrative of the 10 plagues, the 10th of which is the slaying of the firstborn. To avoid the plague, the Israelites are given the instructions for the Passover sacrifice and the laws of the feast of unleavened bread. Pharaoh finally consents to let Israel go, and they leave Egypt. Bo means come. Creator God is different than the gods of the Egyptians. Creator God is within Pharaoh's court and calls Moses to come in. The other gods can't do that kind of thing. The gods of Egypt couldn't go up into Canaan and say, come. They are tied to their geographic location. God is calling Moses into Pharaoh's court. In much the same way God calls Noah and his family into the ark. God doesn't call us to go places he isn't. He paves the way. It says that his son has gone before us and has been tempted in all ways that we could be tempted, which means God has sent his son before us to be victorious in the dark places and stands there and says, come, Bo. I like that. This week, we have Exodus 10 through 13. I will be reading. I've added the brackets here. They're also on the worksheet. And by the way, if you would like the worksheet, I can email it to you. Email the church if you're online, and we'll get that to you. Last year I read 10. This year will be this section, and then hopefully next year we can finish it up. We have the 8th plague, locusts. I underline it because it's the first mention. It's the first time we've seen locusts, which means every other time you see locusts in the Bible, ding, 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 we're reminded back to this plague. And about this plague, we won't read it today, but it says this is worse than they had ever seen in the past in Egypt and worse than they will ever see in the future. Had Egypt seen locust swarms before? Yeah. It's again, God is using a natural thing in a supernatural way. And locust swarms are one of the most fascinating occurrences that happen on our earth. It's incredible what happens. The 9th plague, darkness. We have the warning of the final plague, the first Passover instituted. The 10th plague, death of the firstborn. The exodus from Ramses to Sukkoth, so they actually leave here and they make it the first day's journey. Directions for the Passover, the festival of unleavened bread, and the consecration of the firstborn. From before, plagues 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, we talked last week about there's a line drawn. There's a line drawn where before that, the people in Goshen had to endure, they had to go through the trauma of the plagues, like the frogs. And then between 3 and 4 at the flies, the line was drawn and Goshen was protected. We don't see that language specifically said about the locusts. And we didn't see it specifically said about the boils, but my assumption is that a line was drawn and they were protected henceforth. And so we don't see any lines drawn. However, in the plague of the darkness, it says that there is a light in the houses of the Israelites. What was that light? Did it mean that just the darkness didn't get there, or did it mean the darkness was in all of Egypt and they had a supernatural light? Because that imagery is connected later on. where it says that God's presence himself will be the light in the New Jerusalem. So we hear that later. I want to think about what was it like for the people, the Israelites, because through this process of Moses going in and talking to Pharaoh, things got worse before they got better. And I think about things that happen in our world. The Israelites could very well say, the government is conspiring against us, which was absolutely true. We hear about the few conversations between Moses and Aaron and Pharaoh, but we don't hear about all the other conversations between Pharaoh and his army and Pharaoh and his governors. Was Pharaoh conspiring to kill them? Yeah. But it wasn't what the people were supposed to focus on. We can get caught up and focus on what is going wrong in the government around us or in the world around us or in politics around us. We can get caught up and get really worried about that. But they had good reason to be worried about it. It was true. The government was conspiring to kill them, and still they were supposed to focus on God. They were supposed to focus on the fact that by the end of this, God's name will be on everyone's lips. And I think we can say the same thing. By the end of what's going on in our world, God's name will be on everyone's lips. In Jeremiah, we have the second of prophecies about judgment on Egypt. Last week we had in Ezekiel. Ezekiel is in Babylon prophesying judgment on Egypt. Jeremiah is in Judah at around the same time, prophesying judgment on Egypt. And I like that because what they're saying is, last week we had the image of the cane or the rod or the walker made out of reeds. When the people are trusting in Egypt, it seems sturdy, it seems like it helps, but it probably will crash and hurt you in the long run. And God is saying, you, Israel, have trusted in these people. And in the story we hear, who is Pharaoh trusting in? Pharaoh has the same problem. He's trusting in Egypt. He's actually trusting in himself, which is an unsturdy rod. It's something you shouldn't be relying on. And then in the gospel, in John, we have the dark image of Yeshua dying on the cross, legs broken, side pierced. I've darkened the map up. It looks so different on my computer screen than it does here. I think that's probably pretty good. You can see the green here around the Goshen River Delta. The Nile runs north into the Mediterranean. So at the end of this portion, they leave Ramses and they make it to Sukkoth. It looks like about 30 miles on this map. And we'll continue to see this as they make their journey out into the wilderness. Continuing on from last week, Pharaoh's hard heart. There are 3 words that are used. Last week I did Exodus 4 through 9, and then these are the rest of them. There are 3 words used for the hardening. The first one is kasha, which actually means hard. It's not on this list. It was last week. Strength, which is hazak, and it shows up almost every time here, and then this heavy word. And I'll read through these just to get set up. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh, for I have hardened kabod, his heart, and the heart of his servants, that I may perform these signs of mine among them." It's yellow here. Every single time on this list, God is taking responsibility for Pharaoh's hardening. Last week, we had Pharaoh 3 times take responsibility, or the story says he hardened. This week, it's like God has taken over completely. Again, I see a line has drawn. If you go way up here to chapter 4 and down, at one point there was a line drawn where God said, I'm not going to let him stop. He's on this path. I'm not going to let him get off this path because I have something to accomplish. 20, but the Lord hardened, hazak, strengthened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not let the sons of Israel go. 27, but the Lord hardened, hazak, Pharaoh's heart, and he was not willing to let them go. 11:10, Moses and Aaron performed all these wonders before Pharaoh, yet the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not let the sons of Israel go out of the land. 14:4, thus I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will chase after them, and I will be honored through Pharaoh and all his army, and the Egyptians will know that I am Yehovah, and they did so. 14:8, the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and he chased after the sons of Israel, and the sons of Israel were going out boldly. And I think this is next week. As for me, behold, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them, and I will be honored through Pharaoh and all his army, through his chariots and horsemen. And that's where their good sense probably said, don't follow them into the sea. And God hardened their heart to make sure that they got there. All right, let's pray. Father, I thank you for this beautiful day. I thank you for your word. And I thank you that you identify with this mighty deliverance out of Egypt. And if you can do that, then you can do what's happening in my life now. We ask this in your son, Yeshua's holy name. Amen. Chapter 11, Yehovah said to Moshe, yet one plague more I will bring upon Pharaoh and upon Egypt. This is actually the first time that the word plague is used in connection with what's happening here in the Exodus story. It's on the word study. Afterward, he will let you go from here. When he lets you go, he will drive you away completely. Speak now in the hearing of the people that they ask every man of his neighbor and every woman of her neighbor for silver and gold jewelry. And Yehovah gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. Moreover, the man Moshe was very great in the land of Egypt, in the sight of Pharaoh's servants and in the sight of the people. They had favor. And I like this because I connect this back to the New Testament story where a lot of the people liked Yeshua's message. It's just the few in leadership that were out to get him. I would say that a lot of the Egyptians probably didn't mind these people. It's just the one person in authority that didn't like them. It's just Pharaoh. And that leads me to think, does anyone ever feel sorry for the Egyptians? Anyone ever feel sorry for the cattle that just keep getting hit and hit and hit? Anyone feel sorry for the Egyptians? It wasn't their choice to have these plagues on them. If you had taken a popular vote in the land of Egypt, at what point would they have voted to let the people go? This is a situation of the people suffering because of the hard-heartedness of those in leadership. And I am not making a political statement. I'm saying our kids suffer when we, the parents in authority, have hard hearts. That's the connection I'm drawing. It's the children who suffer. It was the children of Egypt who were suffering because of the hard-heartedness of Pharaoh. The Hebrews had favor in the eyes of the Egyptians. And then this next verse, Moshe was very great in the land of Egypt. We don't know when we see the word very great. We don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Now, I will connect it back to this previous verse and say it was kind of a good thing, but he was a scary individual. They knew his name as much as they knew we're going to know God's name. Everyone knew this Moshe. So Moshe said, thus says Yehovah, about midnight I will go out in the midst of Egypt. What time is midnight? It's as far as you can get from the sun this way and from the sun this way. It's the darkest part in that way of reckoning. And every firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sits on his throne, even to the firstborn of the slave girl who is behind the handmill, and the firstborn of all the cattle. Which means God has a list of all the firstborns. That's an interesting thought. How many firstborns in the room? Okay, Kevin, I'll point at you. Would you have been killed? Was it just the children, or was it all of the firstborns? And the fact that Pharaoh survives it, does that mean that he was not a firstborn? Pharaoh didn't get killed, but it says his firstborn did. Does that mean that Pharaoh himself was a secondborn? And of all of the cattle, which means God has a list of firstborns. This concept of firstborn actually goes way back into Genesis. God pays attention to this. And we heard about the struggle with the patriarchs of who's going to be the firstborn. There shall be a great cry throughout all the land of Egypt, such as there has never been, nor ever will be again. But not a dog shall growl against any of the people of Israel, either man or beast, so that you may know that Yehovah makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. This distinction we talked about last week. It's being distinguished. It's being set apart. It's being highlighted, maybe. But not a dog shall growl. You can go down a rabbit hole on that one. I would simply say, have you ever had a dog that was really defensive and someone came over and they didn't growl at them? Or have you ever had a toddler who was afraid of people and they found that one person and went right to them? We notice things like that. What if your dog who always barks didn't bark that one time? You pay attention. They've been distinguished. And all of these your servants shall come down to me and bow down to me, saying, get out, you and all the people who follow you, and after that I will go out. And he went out from Pharaoh in hot anger. Then Yehovah said to Moshe, Pharaoh will not listen to you, that my wonders may be multiplied in the land of Egypt. Moshe and Aaron did all these wonders before Pharaoh, and Yehovah hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not let the people of Israel go out of his land. Yehovah said to Moshe and Aaron in the land of Egypt, this month shall be for you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year for you. And month there is Chodesh, new moon. Tell all the congregation of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, every man shall take a lamb according to their father's house, a lamb for his household. And if the household is too small for a lamb, then he and his nearest neighbor shall take according to the number of persons, according to what each can eat. So you shall make your count for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male, 1 year old. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats, and you shall keep it until the 14th day of the month, when the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill their lambs at twilight. When we have a lunar month, the beginning is the new moon, so the 14th is always the full moon. And this twilight, again, that can be debated. It means between. The underlying language says between the evenings, which doesn't make sense in English. Then they shall take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and the lintel of the houses in which they eat it. And they shall eat the flesh at night, roasted on the fire, with unleavened bread and bitter herbs they shall eat it. Why did they have unleavened bread that first time? They knew this was coming, so I think right here it says 10th day. Sometime before the 10th day of the month, they knew that they were going to have the Passover on the night of the 14th month. They had plenty of time to make bread and let it rise. It's only after this point that the unleavened bread makes sense because they're in haste, they're running and leaving. But they're told to have unleavened bread even that first time, even though they knew this was coming. So I like to think, so somewhere between the 10th day and the beginning of the month, they're told this is coming. Did the people know they were going to be delivered? Did they know they actually were going to get out of the land at this point? They knew it was against the firstborn, so I would think Moshe knew this is the end. The end is coming. Roasted with his legs and inner parts, I asked a question about that. Let none of it remain until morning. Anything that remains until the morning you shall burn. In this manner you shall eat it with your belt fastened and your sandals on your feet and your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in haste. So you're eating it in the night and you know something's coming. Eat it fast with your shoes on and your staff in your hand. It is Yehovah's Passover, for I will pass through the land of Egypt that night, and I will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast. And on all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments. There are 2 words here, and they sound alike. In English, they sound alike. Passover, Pesach, and pass through, a bar. And I did this last year. It's a bit my soapbox, because in English, these words get confused. So let's look at them. Passover, there's both the noun, Pesach, and the verb, Pasach, closely related, and they show up right in this passage of Exodus 12. In this manner you shall eat it with your belt fastened, your sandals on your feet, your staff in your hand. It is the Lord's Passover. And so it is the name of the feast, the noun. And then the verb form, I will pass over and pass through sound alike. And often we get confused. So the question is, did God jump over the houses of the Hebrews? or did he enter into the houses of the Hebrews? And so there's two different words here. The pass through, I will say, is what the destroyer does. And Passover, there is a passing over, but it's actually passing over the boundary of the blood into covenant, into the houses of the Hebrews. It's passing over the threshold, because remember, they're painting the blood and they're creating a boundary. And the Passover is God entering into covenant with the Hebrews. And we'll see that that's what it says. And Passover, there's a couple of interesting ones. I won't read all these in chapter 12 because I'm going to go back to the slide and we'll read through the story. But let's look at a couple of the other ones. 2 Samuel 4:4. This is the story of Mephibosheth. Remember him? Jonathan's crippled descendant that David takes care of. This is 2 Samuel 4:4. Now Jonathan, Saul's son, had a son crippled in his feet. He was 5 years old when the report of Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel, and his nurse took him up and fled. And it happened in a hurry to flee that he fell and became lame. And his name is Mephibosheth. That fell and became lame is the verb of Passover. He passed over something. And then we see it twice in 1 Kings. Elijah came near to all the people and said, "How long will you hesitate between two opinions?" Elijah is asking the people, how long will you step back and forth? And it's the Passover word. How long will you step back and forth and not make up your mind? God didn't step back and forth over the threshold. It says that night that they're supposed to go in the house and not come out. Don't be double-minded. Don't hesitate. Don't pass over back and forth. And then the second one, 1 Kings 18:26. And then they took the ox that was given them, and they prepared it and called on the name of Baal from the morning until noon, saying, "Oh, Baal, answer us." But there was no voice, and no one answered. And they leapt about the altar which they had made. They're passing over, trying to get their God to listen. Pass through, for I will pass through the land. The first time this one shows up. Passing through. If I were to pass through a land, I would walk, because that's how I get around. Genesis 8:1, but God remembered Noah and all the beasts and the cattle that were with him in the ark, and God caused a wind to pass over the earth, and the water subsided. The wind passed through. How does a wind move? This is, of course, the word ruach. How does the wind move? It moves its way. Moves different than us. So as we read through them, the question is, did God jump over you? Did God exclude you? Or come in and dwell with you? And then in red, I have these other ones because there is another entity later described in the next slide as the destroyer, for I will pass through. And so I think about it like this. God comes in to Egypt as an army, because he's the Lord of hosts. Some of his army goes into the house of the Hebrews, and some of his army goes out. And when there's not blood on the door, that rest of his army goes in and kills the firstborns. So God can be in two places at once, or he's taking credit for what the destroyer is doing. All right. It is Yehovah's Passover, for I will pass through Abar, the land of Egypt, that night, and I will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and on all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments. It is an interesting study to study the gods of Egypt and how the plagues are connected, and God is dismantling their theology. But I think it's more God is dismantling the possibility that the Hebrews, after they leave, will want to call on the gods of Egypt. It's for the Hebrews more than for the Egyptians. And think about it. When they get into the wilderness and say, "We had plenty to eat back in Egypt," they're actually saying, the gods of Egypt did a little bit better job than you're doing. God is concerned that he is eradicating or breaking down the faith of his people in the Egyptians' gods. I think that's what is going on here. I am Yehovah. The blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over, pasak you, and no plague will befall you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. This day shall be for you a memorial day. I have this set off from the previous portion, because this is talking about the first Passover. The first Passover is, get ready, within the next 2 weeks, you're going to leave the land. And this next portion is talking about the second, third, fourth, the future Passovers, when they're not eating in haste, when they're actually in the wilderness. And it's set off like this because I think it's anachronistic. It's a narrative, and Moses figured this was the best place to put it. Although the night before you're getting to leave is probably not the time that they have mental space to hear what's going to happen later. So this is the second through the 39th Passover, probably. This shall be for you a memorial day, and you shall keep it as a feast to Yehovah throughout your generations, as a statute forever. You shall keep it as a feast. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the first day you shall remove leaven out of your houses. Again, this is not talking about today. For if anyone eats what is leavened from the first day until the seventh day, that person shall be cut off from Israel. On the first day you shall hold a holy assembly, and on the seventh day a holy assembly. They're going to be running from Pharaoh on the seventh day and on the first day. But no work shall be done on these days. But whatever everyone needs to eat, that alone may be prepared by you. And you shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for on this day I brought your hosts out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you shall observe this day throughout your generations as a statute forever. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at evening. For 7 days no leaven is to be found in your houses. If anyone eats what is leavened, that person will be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether he's a sojourner or a native of the land. You shall eat nothing leavened. In all your dwelling places you shall eat unleavened bread. This cutoff, we've talked about that before. This is not talking about your toddler accidentally finding a Cheerio and eating it. This is talking about people defiantly teaching, we don't have to do what God says. It's about defiance more than making a mistake. So then we jump back to the narrative. Then Moshe called all the elders of Israel and said to them, go and select lambs for yourselves according to your clan, and kill the Passover, Pesach lamb. Take a bunch of hyssop and dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and touch the lintel and the 2 doorposts and the blood that is in the basin. None of you shall go out the door of your house until morning. For Yehovah will pass through a bar to strike the Egyptians. And when he sees the blood on the lintel and on the 2 doorposts, Yehovah will pass over, Pasach, the door, and will not allow the destroyer to enter your houses to strike you. God comes into their houses, keeps the destroyer out. You shall observe this rite as a statute for you and your sons forever. And when you come to the land that Yehovah will give you, as he has promised, you shall keep this service. And when your children say to you, what do you mean by this service? You shall say, it is the sacrifice of Yehovah's Passover, Pesach. For he passed over, Pasach, the houses of the people of Israel in Egypt, when he struck the Egyptians, but spared our houses. And the people bowed their heads and worshipped. Then the people of Israel went and did so, as Yehovah had commanded Moshe and Aaron. They did so. And then next year we pick up with the actual event, the cry at midnight. Back at the beginning, I don't think we're dismissing anybody. Questions, comments? We have a microphone somewhere. Over here. Kevin.
Thank you. This is just more of a general comment, but so this is year 3 for Adina and I going through this as part of a fellowship, and it is such an incredible blessing. Each year we do this now. We keep seeing and experiencing new things, and I just wanted to share that it's an incredible blessing, and I'm just thankful that we're here with you all and, you know, partaking in these Torah portions, you know, Shabbat by Shabbat every year. So praise the Lord.
Tim, down here at the at our level. Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, it's different being down here. One of the things I always like to look at with the Exodus is the comparison between what they went through at that time, but also between our spiritual walk and kind of the walk the Israelites had in the desert. And I've also noticed that a lot of times we can cry out for the Lord to do something, and in this pattern, they waited 400 years, and then there's the element where it got worse before it got better. And so a lot of times I find in our personal walk that we'll want the Lord to move, and then it'll get worse for a while, and then it'll get better. But when the delivery does come from Egypt, so to speak, or whatever situation, could be a job, could be a relationship, could be something else, it happens really quickly, I've noticed. That the Lord will move, and then it'll seem like he's not moving, seems like he's not hearing our prayers. And then what the scripture teaches us here is that, okay, he's going to move, and you better be ready. You better have your sandals ready, your backpack, and your staff in hand, and the matzah. And so I always like seeing that in this passage here, and it really reminds me more about how the Lord works.
Liliana over here. Good morning.
Good morning. I promise I won't repeat anything you said this week. Anyway, I really want to just add to what Tim was talking about. I've found that in my life too, that there can be times where you're asking and you're asking and you're asking, and it feels like you're just like throwing up a prayer like a bouncy ball against the wall, and it's coming back and hitting you in the face, and you're like, hello? Like, when is the job or the girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever going to happen, or whatever it is? And it's really interesting how we sometimes don't realize that when all the hard, ugly stuff is happening, that's when we need to make sure that we're really focused on what he's trying to show us in that time, because that's the preparation. Because how many times has it been where, like Tim was saying, you're going through that, and then boom, all of a sudden, you got to go. And how are we always ready for that? Maybe not. I'm reminded of the parable where it talks about Yeshua returning, and it's the 9 virgins, so the ones who were prepared and the ones who were not. And they ended up missing out on the wedding feast or the blessing. So just some additional thoughts.
Yeah, when we look at these 10 plagues, they were being trained. There was a previous plague about the hail that said if you're outside, you're going to get wounded. If your animals are outside, they're going to get killed. And that's, again, amplified with the 10th plague. If there were some Hebrew teenagers that are like, I don't need to stay in the house with my family, do you think that happened? With 600,000 males, which means there's about 600,000 females, and there's probably another 600,000 young people and old people. Do you think there are any Hebrews that said, the blood doesn't matter, I'm going to sneak out with my friends? Do you think there were any Egyptians that said, I see a pattern here, I'm going to act like those guys, and said, can I be part of this with you? Can I have some blood to put on my door? Or can I just come hang out at your house? Yeah. Good. Let's go to the word study. This picture I got from First Fruits of Zion because I just like it. He was getting so frustrated. All right, sign. Is it okay to ask for signs? Yeah. 10:1, Then the Lord said to Moses, go into Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the heart of his servants, that I may show these signs of mine among them. The sign is God proving his existence here down on the earth. In the Hebrew, it's in the Hebrew 60 times. In the Exodus story, it's 13 times. The first time, what do you think is in Genesis 1:14? And God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. Genesis 4:15, this is an interesting one. And the Lord said to him, whoever kills Cain, vengeance will be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord appointed a sign for Cain, so that no one finding him would slay him. Where was that sign put? Was it just a signpost so people could read, oh, by the way, don't kill Cain? Was it a physical mark put on him? Cain is the first person who's marked, devoted. 10:1, I just read that one. Microphone? Yeah, what do you got, Jonathan?
So the mark on Cain, kind of what I grew up being taught about that was that he had like a birthmark on his face or forehead that was visible with or without, clothing, whatever. So the passersby, oh, that's the guy with the
It's
thing,
that guy.
Yeah, don't mess with that dude.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course everybody knew what that meant. It's kind of like, every village has a story. Word travels fast, So.
Yeah. So let's connect that to Exodus 12. Where are we? Yeah, the ones that are in this portion. The blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you live. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and no plague will befall you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. The blood was a sign. It designated, it set those houses apart, and the destroyer could see it, but also people could see it. And then Exodus 13:9, it shall serve as a sign on your hand and as a reminder on your forehead, that the law of the Lord may be in your mouth, for with a powerful hand the Lord brought you out of Egypt. And then later in Revelation, we see another mark, and the mark is for protection. The mark on Cain was also for protection. The mark on Cain was so that they wouldn't kill him. I think they're connected. We'll spend a lot of time this year looking at the feasts and the festivals, particularly in the New Testament, because they have that word festival, and we just kind of jump over it. Which festival are they talking about? So feast is Hag. We saw Hagag last week. There's two forms of it. This shall be a feast to you. And I'll mention a couple. Feast. The Hosea one. And often these are, Hosea, I will put an end to all her gaiety, her feasts, her new moons, her Sabbaths, and all her festal assemblies. Often with replacement theology, this is used to say that the Old Testament doesn't matter anymore. When God says he's upset with their feasts, he doesn't want them to stop doing feasts. He wants them to do it correctly. When God says, I'm tired of your prayers, he doesn't want you to stop praying. He wants you to, well, basically what they were doing is standing in a puddle of their own disobedience and asking God to do things. He wanted them to deal with their disobedience first, pray later. When God says, I'm tired of your sacrifices and your worship, he doesn't mean stop doing it. He means you, again, do it correctly. And Hosea 2:11 is one of those that's misused. And then rejoice, samach or samech. And that's the traditional holiday greeting in Hebrew, which is Hag Sameach. And it comes from Deuteronomy 16, 14, and 15, which both have the word rejoice and the word feast in the same verse. This word rejoice, can anyone think of a psalm that has the word rejoice in it? Like 100, right? I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. That's this word, samach. And plague. Plague is only used once in the Exodus narrative, and it's that one we read today. The first mention of the word plague is in Genesis 17. It's also in context of Egypt. But the Lord struck Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abraham's wife. When Egypt won't let the wife go, God gets them out through plagues. This word plague, I'll read it. In Genesis, the word plague shows up once. In Exodus, it shows up once. In Leviticus, 61 of the 78 times are in Leviticus. The word plague is used as a negative distinguishing mark, like a rash or an infection, something like that. I'll read Leviticus 13:13. Let's see, 1, 2, 3. The priest shall look at the mark on the skin of the body, that's the word plague. And if the hair in the infection, that's the word plague, has turned white, and the infection, same word plague, appears to be deeper than the skin of the body, it is an infection of leprosy. When the priest has looked at him, he shall pronounce him unclean. In that verse alone, the word plague is used 4 times, and in ESV, it's translated 2 different ways, mark and infection. Questions, comments? Patricia up front. Up front here, Zach.
The word Hag comes from the verb Hagag, which can mean celebrate, keep a feast. It also means to move in a circle or dance. And I've always liked that because that's what we do.
Yeah. Some of us do. Which feast were they going to celebrate in the wilderness? If Pharaoh had let them go, which feast would they have celebrated in the wilderness? The feast that they celebrated in Egypt was Passover. What's the first feast they celebrate in the wilderness? It hasn't happened yet. This first one is Passover. It happens in Egypt. Then they go out of the land. So we'll be keeping an eye out for which feast is coming. Remember, Moshe says we have to take our animals with us because we don't know exactly what God's going to require of us. The feasts haven't showed up yet as we know them. They're articulated in Leviticus mostly. Number 2, did anyone wonder about Moshe's connection? God says, raise your hand, and he raises his rod. Now, I said a few weeks ago when it first showed up, God asked him, what is in your hand? And I don't think there's something magical about the rod. If he had been some other kind of professional, if he was a carpenter and had a hammer in his hand, I think God would have used his hammer. He was a shepherd. That was what was in his hand. But God says, raise your hand, and he raises the rod. Is he getting those two mixed up, or is God simply saying, if I never let go of this and I raise my hand, of course it comes with it? I wonder if there is an unhealthy relationship between Moshe and his rod. I wonder if that's what we see develop when he hits the rock instead of speaking to the rock. When we get there, I'll say more. But has anyone ever told their kids to use their words? Sometimes when we get frustrated, it's easier just to strike the thing than it is to articulate. And remember, he had trouble speaking. God asked him to do it the hard way. When did they ask of their neighbor? The word that says, and they plundered the Egyptians, it actually says they delivered the Egyptians. We mentioned that before. We could see it as the Hebrews delivered the Egyptians of their gold and silver. We could see it that way. Or we could see a redemptive act there. Remember at one point, and it might be said sarcastically, Pharaoh says, go and bless me also. It might be said a bit sarcastically, but I wonder about the relationship between the common Hebrew and the common Egyptian. And I wonder if when the common Hebrews got gold and silver from the Egyptians, if the Egyptians said, and bless me as you go. I wonder if there was something positive, salvific, relational going on of saying, here, take some gold and bless me. This is my land. I have to stay. I wonder if that's why they use the word deliver. In English, in our versions, it says plunder, but the underlying word is deliver. What do you think the light was in their homes? Jonathan, you have a thought?
The light maybe is just Animal fat candles.
So how did the Egyptians not have light? Yeah, what was this miracle? I think one of the scariest things, well, I have not been blind. I think one of the scariest things would be able to feel, if you had a lamp burning and all of a sudden you couldn't see it, but you could still feel it, where fire would be hot but not bright. That's kind of the image I have of the Egyptians' homes. They're like, I know I had a lamp here, ow!
That's a really interesting concept. Another thing to think about is that it's mentioned that Egyptians were not favorable towards what? They didn't like sheep, yeah. Shepherds. So that means you have a lack of animal fats to use as oils and fuels. So they may have also not had their normal ways of making light in the Egyptian homes, and only the Jewish people would have possibly had that as a custom or a normal way of a normal fuel source for them. The Egyptians were like, "No, we don't have any of that stuff in our homes. That's not kosher for them, you know."
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think olives grow down there. I'm not sure what they used for oil. Number 3, how much greenery was left after the hail? So the hail knocks off, and this is connected to the time of year, the month, the Abib. The hail knocked off all the greenery. And then what happened? In a few weeks, what would happen? The green would come back. And then the Egyptians would think, not the Egyptians, well, the Egyptians would think, we're saved. It's over. And this is echoed in Joel, when all of the different levels or different ranks of locusts come through. And if there's any left over, the second group comes and takes care of it. And then the third group. And the hail knocked off all the greenery. It started to grow back. And then the locusts came. And I ask 6, I don't know the answer to this. When was the new year commemorated? What I'm really asking is, God reset the calendar when they were still in Egypt. It's not like God took them out of Egypt into the wilderness and then there said, oh, by the way, this is going to be our New Year's celebration. He told them that back in Egypt. They had been living on Egypt's calendar for how long? Long enough that it was ingrained in their system. For them, New Year's is always connected with deliverance. New Year's Day is always 2 weeks before deliverance. New Year's Day is the new moon, and they're looking forward to the full moon, which will be their deliverance. What does January 1 mean to us? In our culture, January 1 and Christmas are 1 week apart. So it's hard for us to separate the two, but just a thought experiment. If Christmas didn't exist, let's say if it was Thanksgiving and then like more than a month until New Year's, what would our mentality be around New Year's? What do we think about at New Year's? What they were told to think about is 2 weeks later is deliverance. 2 weeks later is the Passover. 2 weeks later, New Year's was always smack dab in the middle of the signs and wonders and the deliverance. Where are we? Gita? Good morning.
Good morning. When you were talking about light, it kind of got my thought back to something that came as we were reading this week. But so much of the verbiage of these plagues connect also to Genesis 1 and 2 and the creation story. And I know we often look at these 10 plagues and how they relate to different Egyptian gods, but I think it was also going back to saying that he is the creator, and that this process of these different signs and wonders was a decreation of their world that they were living in then, that they could look around at the end of these 9 plagues and see like just devastation and basically tohu vabohu, but the chaos back to pre-creation kind of situation. And it's significant too because if you're in a culture like the Hindu culture where there's a God for everything, there's one God who's a creator, and there's one God who's for wisdom, and one God who's for business and money and all these different things. But he was emphasizing, I think, here that he is the one God for everything and the creator, and especially because Pharaoh believed he was God and stated that he was God, and to stand up against that and to show his people and the Egyptians that he is the one true and only God.
I like it. Yeah, I hear you saying that when water doesn't behave properly, it's kind of like heading back into chaos. It's not following the natural order. In the 10 plagues, the water doesn't follow the rules. The frogs don't follow the rules. They cross their boundaries. A lot of the creation story is God saying, you stay here. You come over here. This division, putting boundaries, separating the light and the darkness. In the plagues, the darkness is out of control again. The darkness isn't where the darkness is supposed to be. Yeah. So that connection back to the chaos there of the original creation story. Good. What's the name of the first month? Nisan or Abib? Or one? Originally, the names of the days of the week are simply the numbers. The seventh day is called 7, and that is connected to Shabbat. So the third day is just called 3. The first month is just called the first month. And this Abib is connected to what happens seasonally with the growth of, the barley? This is Exodus 9:31. Now the flax and the barley were ruined, for the barley was in the ear, that's the word Abib, and the flax was in the bud. So it's the time of year when it starts to bud like that. The word Nisan, which is generally used as the name for the Jewish first month, that word is not used until Babylon, until the coming back from Babylon. 7 and 8. Do they usually roast animals with the inner parts still inside? Did they really throw the Passover lamb with all of its hair and skin and everything on the spit? Is that what it says here? I think that's what it says. That's not a normal thing to do. Is that how that they roasted the Passover lamb in Passovers number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on? Did they roast it with its entrails? I think that it's connected to this next one, leave none until morning. That first Passover, they were leaving in the morning, which means if they left leftovers, they would have just been left in the houses because they would have fled. God's very particular. I don't want any of the Passover lamb left for a dog to eat after you leave. And I think later on they have a place and a place to burn the entrails of a sacrifice. So they could separate it and they could burn it over here in a clean place, because even the guts of a sacrifice are still clean and holy and need to be taken care of properly. They didn't have a place to do that yet. I kind of see that going on this first Passover. Jonathan.
So like when you rotisserie cook an animal, mostly whole animal, that's kind of what I envision they probably would have done, is set up some Y-post sticks and have some kid out there going, hey man, keep that thing rotating, don't let it burn. You gut an animal, you skin it, you behead it, you take all that stuff and you toss it on the side of the coals. If you got a bed of coals going, you just throw all that stuff on the side. It's going to cook, it's going to get consumed with all of it anyways, especially if you're sitting there for several hours.
I would think.
Yeah.
But this one says cook it with its head and its legs and its inner parts.
Well, what do? Put that next to
Okay,
with it.
I see what you're saying.
It's all on the same fire.
Doesn't
It's all
mean
in the
you
same
eat it.
place. Right,
Yeah. It's still in your house.
right.
Yeah.
It hasn't changed.
That's more
location.
appetizing to me than the image I had in my head. Let's go to the end, because we have to be disturbed by this a few times a year. How exactly did they break the legs? And why I say that is because I've worked construction with young males, and there's a bit of a contest to see who can do it better than the other guy. We tend to do feats of strengths. So like if you can drive a 16-penny nail with one blow. These were Roman execution professionals. And I'm sure that they had contests going who was better at it than the other guy. How exactly did they break their legs? It's brutal. And you can imagine the first time one of these soldiers had to do it. They probably weren't good at it. And then later they got better at it. And there's probably the grizzled old guy who had broken so many people's legs. The young guys are like, oh, watch him do it. This is going to be awesome. It's a disturbing spectacle. There's two guys on crosses on the other side of him. Were they Jewish? It's probably a pretty good assumption. You know, they were an occupied people, but there was also foreigners that came through. It just says they were thieves. They didn't have to be Jewish. Does that change the story up there? What's a high Sabbath? Liliana wants to answer. Good.
We'll see if I remember correctly. I believe it means that a high Sabbath is it's already a Sabbath, but then because it's one of the not necessarily high holy days, but or high holidays, but it's also the first day of a feast. That's what makes it a high Sabbath.
There are rabbit trails on this subject, but in general, we had the issue of the Passover this week. It says, well, there's the Passover, and then there's the first day of unleavened bread, and then 7 days later is the end, and these two, the beginning and end of unleavened bread, or the beginning and end of Sukkot, are Sabbaths, but they're not weekly Sabbaths necessarily. They could line up and land on weekly Sabbaths. So some people say that a high Sabbath that's talked about here is a weekly Sabbath and a feast Sabbath that line up. Other people read it as it's simply a feast Sabbath. So the first day of unleavened bread would be another time you're not supposed to work, although in Exodus it says on like the first day and the last day, you're allowed to cook on the first and the last day. It doesn't say you're allowed to cook on Shabbat proper, on the seventh day of the week, but it says you're allowed to cook on these weekly ones. I'm not sure. And this leads into the debate of when exactly, what day of the week Yeshua was actually killed.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, we could spend hours talking about this, but I would encourage people to do some research because there are discussions about this topic of a high Sabbath could very well impact when our Lord was actually crucified in terms of the chronology during a week. And there's not agreement on it. So this is where the rabbit trail comes in, and you can spend a lot of time on it. It might be worth your time, though, not you specifically, Roland, but people here just doing some research on it because there's a lot of discussion that's taking place about it. So,
and there are people who call it when they line up a super Sabbath. I don't know if any of you heard that one. Water and blood. I don't have an answer to this, but it is very interesting to go read through. We know scientifically that blood is mostly water. The Nile, even when it was turned to blood, it still was mostly water. And I'll just read through some. Matthew 27:24. I simply put in water and blood and did a search, and there's 24 times it shows up. Read through them. I'll read about 5. Matthew 27:24. So when Pilate saw that he was gaining nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourself. It's water and blood. Hebrews 9:19, for when every commandment of the law that has been declared by Moses to all the people, he took the blood of calves and goats with water and scarlet wool and hyssop and sprinkled both the book itself and all the people. 1 John 5:6. This is he who came by water and blood, Jesus Christ, not by the water only, but by the water and the blood. And the Spirit is the one who testifies, because the Spirit is truth. 1 John 5:8. The Spirit and the water and the blood, and these three agree. Revelation 11:6. The two witnesses have the power to shut the sky that no rain may fall during the days of their prophesying. And they have power over the waters to turn them into blood and to strike the earth with every kind of plague as often as they desire. Revelation 16:4. The third angel poured out his bowl into the rivers and the springs of water, and they became blood. Something quick?
Yes.
Go ahead.
The only thing I was going to just add to what Kevin said, because I completely agree it's important to study and everything, but also just whenever we go into things like that with timings and really looking at those things, to just really seek the Lord in prayer before you go into a study like that, because just from my personal experiences, walking in different, I guess you could say, levels of the Judaism part, it can be really easy to slip into what man says and not what actually the Lord says. So also being mindful of like what your heart posture is when you go into looking into that. And I could say more, but I'll just leave it there to honor time.
Yeah, good. We're out of time. Thank you for your participation. Let's close this. Father, I thank you for sending your Son. I thank you that we all have the experience of knowing when we were not delivered in the past and knowing when we are delivered. And there will be more deliverances, more miraculous exoduses in our life. We thank you that we can trust in what you've done in the past and look forward to you doing more in the future. Be with us as we go throughout this day. We ask this in your Son, Yeshua's holy name. Amen. We'll see you back here in 13 minutes. Thank you.